Over the weekend, I was at a barbecue with friends, and we got on the topic of ghosts because recently my husband's coworker shared with him some pictures that she took when she worked at the Stanley Hotel of a ghost in the hallway. So for those who aren't familiar, I'm sure pretty much everyone watching is familiar, but the Stanley Hotel is largely known for being one of the most haunted hotels in the United States. It's been covered on lots of videos, lots of documentaries. I didn't know this, but it was apparently the inspiration for Stephen King's Overlook Hotel in The Shining, which the novel came out in 1977, and the film, Stanley Kubrick film, which came out in 1980. And it was the official filming location for the 97 TV miniseries. I do vaguely remember that the miniseries that came out, but I don't think I'd seen The Shining then, and I saw it later on, and yeah, it's definitely a classic. But guests at the hotel included the unsinkable Molly Brown of Titanic fame, and then Theodore Roosevelt. But anyway, it's a very storied history. I just wanted to kind of provide that context. So anyway, this person's at a barbecue, and they're sharing some pictures that they took at the Stanley Hotel. So these are interesting photos, but my friend then said, "Oh, I can top that," and then proceeded to tell me that when he worked in a hospital about 10 years ago, him and another nurse were monitoring the cameras on the ICU floor and saw a child running in and out of the rooms. Oh, okay. Well, that's pretty freaky. They radioed to the floor staff and were told they didn't have a child in ICU at the time. And so my friend and another nurse physically went down to the room to investigate. And lo and behold, no one was there. They get back to the nurse station, and the nurse that had stayed there was stunned. And so when they get back, obviously there's this look on the nurse's face, and you know, they're kind of saying, "What happened?" So the nurse says, "You won't believe what I saw on the monitor after you guys left." And she had taken a picture of the monitor and said that a girl appeared out of the doorway after you left the room and watched you walk down the hall. And then apparently this story and picture, which I'll put up, caused a big stir among the staff because a couple of days prior, a young girl had passed away in the ICU after an anaphylactic episode, and some thought the image looked like her. An anaphylactic must be some kind of an allergy, or must have been allergic to something, but I'm not quite sure. That's terrible, though. Then management stepped in and made people sign non-disclosure agreements and had a whole process around this because apparently paranormal activity is a very regular thing in hospitals. Again, that's not something I would have, thought of necessarily, because when I think of hospitals, I think very what's the term I'm looking for? Very facility-esque, bright lights, things like that. But then, you think at some point the lights have to go off, and there's every building has a story. These things happen. This whole story and picture has really captivated me the past few days. So this poster says basically is getting this secondhand, and that's a really interesting point. I think is that a lot of times the scariest things we hear, and I think we tend to hear secondhand if it's coming through someone's. It's one thing to see it, but if it's coming through like another lens, that can be it can really stick with you when you hear things that way. Everything that he said seemed 100% authentic, but this image, I made him text it to me, and it's dated around the same time he said, and it's haunting me. And then asked, "What do you think? Is it real? Do these things happen regularly at hospitals?" So it's definitely interesting, and you can see this image here of it's a very I can't quite tell exactly so there's a door and it looks like there's maybe like a small table maybe, and then this outside is kind of the hallway. But that looking at this image, it's an unmistakable child, some sort of an image, ghostly image there. I mean, it certainly looks authentic. So there were some really good comments to this post too. Another poster left a comment that said, my own personal hospital experience. So last September, I was hospitalized for a month, and every now and then during the night, and sometimes during the day, I would hear bare footsteps running on the VCT flooring. And I had to look that up because I was curious, what's VCT flooring? So apparently VCT flooring is vinyl composite tile, and it's basically just popular flooring in like healthcare and schools and education and stuff. So really kind of expensive, tough to maintain, stuff like that. But that's when you think of the normal kind of hospital or school flooring, that's what VCT is. But I called the nurses on some occasions because I was having trouble sleeping during the night, I guess because of this running this person was hearing, and they assured me it was the morphine and nothing walking around. Then one morning around 5 a.m., when I would get my blood drawn about every other hour, the blood nurse was in the room, and we both heard distinct footsteps running out of the room. Oh, so it was in the room, not just outside. She turned around to see and then looked back at me, and I told her, see, it wasn't the morphine. See, it isn't the morphine. So see, it isn't the morphine. She returned with the head nurse, and we're in the room for about 30 minutes until they heard the footsteps outside in the hall, and the head nurse went to check, and no one was there. We heard the footsteps continuously until I was discharged a couple of weeks later. So that's another testimonial to hospital ghosts. Another poster commented, so people kind of started stacking their experiences up on this, so I figured I'd include it because it's really good stuff. So another poster, I used to fix office equipment, and several hospitals in my city used our company. I once had to install new fax machines 10 or 12 years ago. We basically replaced every fax in 3 different hospitals in the same healthcare network. So all those fax machines, I'm pretty sure very few people knew how to get them to work because fax machine, don't get me started. Anyway, it was a very interesting few weeks. It was mainly a lot of odd feelings, especially when I was in parts only used during high volume times like flu season. So this is interesting. There would be some hospitals where some parts of the hospital would not be used. Okay, interesting. There were a couple of times that I clearly heard the beeping of machinery and monitors that were not on, and vague mumbling. Wow, that would be creepy. One of the weirdest was when I got lost in an old hospital that had been partially turned into administrative offices, and the rest was just kind of left as is. This wing still had equipment and beds. It was obviously cleaned semi-regularly, but they were empty, unused, and outdated. There's some YouTube videos out there of some ghostly occurrences and some freaky occurrences in hospitals, and that's what'll tend to happen. There will be wings of these hospitals where they're just not being used, but there's still stuff in there. There's beds, there's equipment, but it'll be kind of closed off. That just seems really odd to me. A, why they can't do something with it, but B, just to kind of leave everything there. But I wonder how common that really is. I wonder how common it is for maybe if something just really bad happens, or just something that's sort of they want to keep under wraps, and then they cordon it off for something like that. I wonder if that's more common than people might think. Let me see. So this wing still had equipment and beds. It was obviously cleaned semi-regularly, but they were empty, unused, and outdated. It was a very sort of subliminal experience. I kept hearing the normal hospital sounds occasionally, even though I was the only one in the wing. I got very well acquainted with a few hospitals. Some were new, and some were over 100 years old. They were all creepy in at least one spot, and in some, many places were off-putting. Yeah, I can imagine that would be if you're, going around and spending your time in these areas, by yourself, and it's deserted and closed, and there's kind of still stuff there. That's just weird. That's freaky. Especially in that kind of setting, Last poster that I just really thought was interesting. So says, my grandmother has often spoken of seeing ghosts when she was a child and a teenager. When she was in the hospital recently, she was in her 80s at the time. I was sitting in her room with her. I saw her look at something at the entrance of the room and then track it into the room and then into the bathroom, which was around a corner. At this exact same time, the little night lights near the floor and by the bathroom on the same wall flickered about 4 times. Grandma turned to me and asked, "Who's that?" And not really wanting to ask, but I did anyway, I said, "Who's who?" To which she said, "The man who just walked in here and went around the corner." And yeah, and this happened about 3 times while she was in the hospital and I was visiting. Wow, that's pretty substantial, especially if someone like the grandmother, spoke of seeing ghosts when seems like throughout her life as a child and a teenager. I've never been sensitive to things like that, even though I'm really obviously into it. I'm very fascinated with it. There are folks in my family who've kind of been, really sensitive. So I guess in a way it's not surprising. So I wonder if this poster was just kind of, business as usual, grandma seeing ghosts again, or if this was really kind of a surprising, shocking thing for them. I wonder. I hope you all enjoyed these creepy hospital ghost stories. I'm going to be back. The plan next week is to be back with something pretty special, working on something a little new. Again, experimenting with this new format. I hope everyone enjoys it, finds it a little more engaging. Until then, please be sure, again, to like and subscribe, hit the notification to be notified of new videos, and I will see you all very soon.